Thank you, Jay Dunn. Thank you, Jay Dunn. Man, this is a packed house. I love it. Hey, my freshman year, I came to college, and I was full of confidence. I was feeling pretty good. I scored decent on my ACT, so I thought college, this is going to be a breeze. So I don't know what major I'm going to do. Talk to my folks. I'm like, hey, what should I do? They say, hey, your sister did computer science. Why don't you try that? I'm like, okay, sure, let's do it. So I started for computer science, and within the first couple weeks, I realized this is just too easy. I need something that's a little more challenging for me, and so I wanted to up it a little bit, so I switched to business. Did anybody else start maybe in an engineering and a science and were like, hey, I need a little more challenge, I'm going up to business? Yeah, come on. That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. I became a finance major, went through Eller, I loved it all, and I remember during my time in the business college learning about the housing crisis of 2008. And we might be a little young to really have experienced this firsthand, but let me just explain it to you guys tonight as simply as I can. Summer, I got a diagram. Okay, you guys, this is just American history you got to know. Okay, so this is how it happened. Basically, you got Bank A, and they gave a loan to Billy. Billy wanted a house. Here's $200,000 for a house. Billy says, I'm going to give you $1,500 a month for the next 30 years. That's going to be worth $500,000. So Bank A is like, all right, I give 200, I get 500. This is great. Well, Bank A says, hey, I just gave out $200,000. I want some money right now. Give me some money right now. So they go and say, hey, Bank B, I've got this agreement to get $500,000 over the next 30 years. Why don't you pay me $300,000 and I'll give you that $500,000? So Bank B is like, sure, this works great for us too. Everybody wins in this scenario. And so the banks just kept doing it over and over and over again. Well, the banks eventually started to see, man, I get a lot of money for every mortgage loan I give out, so I don't even care if someone can pay back the loan. I'm just going to start sending them, and then I'm going to sell it before that money ever gets traced back to me. You can see how this might turn out badly. Well, there was a guy named Michael Burry. And Michael Burry, you can show the picture. Michael Burry, he started seeing this. He started looking very carefully at how this system was working. And he said, yeah, the banks are making a lot of money right now, but I don't know if down the road this is going to be the most wise thing. And so he owned an investment firm, so he said, hey, I'm going to put all my money into betting against the housing market. So basically, if the housing market crashes, he's going to make a lot of money. So he starts going to banks, and he's like, hey, I'm willing to give you, say, $20 today, and if the housing market goes down, you pay me $100. That's basically the deal that he made. And he was going to bank after bank after bank, making this deal, and the banks just thought, this is free money for us. This guy is a lunatic. His investors that gave him money to grow, they started worrying. They're like, hey, what are you doing with my money? You are losing all of my money. The whole time, Michael's like, man, if you just give it time, this is going to work. Well, sure enough, 2008 happens. People start foreclosing on their homes, and the housing market crashes significantly. Everybody loses money. The stock market crashes. People whose whole retirement savings that they had spent their whole life saving up cut in half or a third over a couple weeks. Everybody except Michael and his investors. Michael, during the 2008 housing crisis, when everybody else lost half or more of their money, made $100 million. And his investors made $700 million. It was a once-in-a-lifetime timing and opportunity, and he saw it, and he was wise enough to take action for it. Why were there so few people who were able to see this coming? Like, surely people are smart enough to see, like, hey, this might not work out well in the long term. Sure, we're making money now, but surely this might not work out for the long term. Why weren't more people able to see this? Well, man, what's true about life is few people live with foresight. Few people ask themselves, is what I'm doing today going to set me up well 5 years, 10 years, 30 years down the road? Being in a room like this, you guys are a bunch of leaders, and I know the students here, I know you guys work hard, I know you guys are smart, I know you guys are willing to sacrifice now for a better payoff later. I've seen you guys do it. And so I have no doubt that you guys will excel professionally, financially. I really believe that. But man, it is even more rare for people to live with the foresight of thinking, hey, how is what I'm doing now, how am I living my life going to impact not only the next 5, 10, 20 years, but eternity with God? Michael Burry saw that the best place he can invest was doing the exact opposite of what everybody else was doing, and he had the greatest return in his career. What if the greatest investment you could make is spending your time in college growing in your faith? Your greatest resource in college is not your money, but your time. Where are you investing your time in college? Where are you investing your life? Tonight is our last late night of the semester. I mean, we've had an awesome time so far. The people who have been here throughout the whole semester, y'all have been able to hear talks on the essentials of following Christ, having Christ at the center of your life, living a life devoted to prayer to God, reading the Bible, getting a team around you to push you towards following Christ, and even initiating faith conversations with others. We just finished the Tough series where we talked about the tough topics that college students want to talk about, but man, they're hard to hear sometimes. We saw what does Jesus say about sacrifice in this life for him? What does Jesus talk about drugs and alcohol, sex, image, pursuing success? Man, we've talked about all the tough topics. We've laid it all out. We've given y'all the best information we have. The question now, whether you've been there for it all or whether this is your first time back in a while, is what now? What are we going to do now with our greatest resource in college, our time? We're going to talk about that tonight. But first, I want you all to answer a question with the people around you. If you could devote 200 hours to learning anything, what would you learn? Talk with the people around you. Bring it back. Hey, what are some answers? I want to hear some of these. What do we got? What we got? Guitar. I love that. I love that. What else? A business? Business. Just business, baby. That's all it is. I heard language over here. Snowboard. Boom. I love it. I got that 200 hours because the amount of days from the end of the last finals to the start of next year, if you did 2 hours a day, you'd get 200 hours. You could probably be pretty good in 200 hours. Anyway, hey, my freshman year, I told you guys, I started off computer science. I had to switch to business. I needed the challenge, okay? And I remember there was this class called MIS. You guys know. Yeah, y'all know. MIS 111. And remember there's this project called APB1. Okay, so back when I was a freshman, basically the project was you were assigned a stock, and you had to say this is either a good stock to buy or a good stock to sell. And so the stock that I had was called NVIDIA. And if you know stocks right now, you might know a little bit about it. But at this time, I didn't know much about NVIDIA. So I start doing as much research as I can. I'm looking carefully at what this NVIDIA stock is all about. I start learning NVIDIA is behind computer processing chips, and they're kind of the hardware behind the technology for self-driving cars, for AI, and for computer gaming systems. So I start thinking, I'm using my 18-year-old brain, and I'm like, I think a lot of those things are going to continue to grow in popularity, market size. I think this would be a good stock to buy. So I've kind of made my case, present it, get a good grade on the project, but then I started thinking, if I really believe the research that I gave, I put my money where my mouth is. So I look at my savings account. Okay, I had worked the summer before. I had about $2,500 in there. Sounds like a lot, or sounds like not a lot, depending on who you are, where your bank account's at. Well, for me, I'm like, okay, let's do this thing. So I put $2,000 into NVIDIA, almost all the savings I had. And man, I was so scared. I didn't know what I was doing. 18 years old, first time buying a stock. I'm calling my dad. Dad, how do you do this? Get on E-Trade, set up the account, let's roll. Well, I kind of forget about it. And then a couple years later, I'm looking to buy a house, and I ended up finding the stock that I had. I ended up selling it, and I made a little bit of money, and I kind of regret selling it. Because that same $2,000 invested my freshman year, if you were to guess what it would be worth today if I didn't sell it, $28,000. I got out for like $8,000. I started at 2, got out at 8, and I'm like, okay, I quadrupled my money. That's great. But if I didn't sell it, today it would be worth $28,000. I'm sorry, Hannah, but you wanted the house, so we had to do it. That's the wife. Man, when it comes to faith, there is no greater time to invest than in college. Anything you start investing in, the sooner you do, the better it will be, because the more time you give it to compound and grow. It's the same thing in faith. Man, if you want a great walk with God in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, if you start now, it will only make that greater and easier. Man, tonight we're going to look at 3 verses from the Bible that help us glean some wisdom for how we should use our time, especially now as college students. So it's in the book of Ephesians, chapter 5. It says this: "Look carefully then how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time, because the days are evil. Therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is." God says to look carefully how you walk. How many people do you know in college that think about, how am I living my life today, and is it setting me up for a life of following Jesus later? It's rare. Man, God says, hey, look carefully how you walk. Consider your ways. Take an audit. Say, hey, how was last week? Was I growing closer to God, or was I not? If I wasn't growing closer to God, what do I need to do this week to change and be different? Look carefully how you walk. Man, I was analyzing that in a video stock my freshman year. I thought I was, Michael Burry, that guy. I thought I was that big short guy. But God says, hey, look carefully how you walk. And then he says, not as unwise, but wise. And it's interesting that he says that, because I think naturally most people walk unwise. It's rare to live wisely. Why is that? Well, man, wisdom is found in God's word, the Bible. And wisdom is also found in seeking that wisdom from people who know the Bible well. How many people do you know that live their life asking others who might be further along in the faith, hey, what do you think about my life? Am I growing closer to Jesus? What can I do to be different? The next part says, making the best use of time, because the days are evil. I love this one, especially for us in college right now, because there is no greater time than right now. Making the best use of time. I think of Hannah Detter. She's a senior here involved in StuMo. And man, she came to StuMo as a freshman. She started coming to late night, growing in her faith, wanting to learn more. She started hanging out with her friend Taylor, and starts growing in her faith. Man, she starts growing friendships with different girls in StuMo. She said yes to every opportunity she had to grow in faith, whether that was going to SMC, our winter conference, going to Kaleo, our summer program. Man, she took every opportunity to grow in her faith. She came back from Kaleo, and she wanted to help people in Zona Zoo, because she was involved in Zona Zoo. She wanted to help them know more about God and help them grow in their faith. Man, she has helped so many people know who Jesus is in Zona Zoo, and she's invested her time in college to growing in her faith. Man, Hannah is someone who made the best use of her time. Hannah is someone who invested her time in college for Christ. Well done, Hannah. Keep on going. I think about Mason Comer. He's another senior here, involved for a while. He's from Oro Valley, okay? He's a T-Loke. He'll tell you all about it. He's a wrestler, okay? You know T-Lokes are all wrestlers. This guy's no different. Freshman year was COVID year. He wasn't even on campus. He was living at home, kind of didn't get the best experience. He never had those dorm stories, okay? He never got to stay in Likens. He never got to experience Crazy Natto. Sophomore year, he comes around, and his friend starts inviting him to StuMo late night. He starts coming. He gets invited to SMC. He didn't have a lot of money at the time, but he still sent it to SMC. And he'll tell you it's worth every penny. He got invited to go to Kaleo. He ends up going to Kaleo, growing a ton in his faith the summer after his sophomore year. And then he does something wild. He rushes a fraternity as a junior. A junior, man, that's unheard of, but Mason said, hey, I want to make the best use of my time. This dude rushes as a junior, and in one semester, he's already elected to the executive board, wanted to be a leader in the house. He starts mentoring younger guys in the house. He leads Bible studies with his buddy Aaron in the house, and now, man, he is leaving a legacy at the Kappa Sig fraternity house. Mason invested his time in college. Mason made the best use of his time. Well done, Mason. Keep going. Your greatest resource in college is your time. How are you going to invest your time in college? Invest your college to grow in your faith. So I got a question for you guys. Talk with the people around you. How could you invest your time in college to grow in your faith? Think practical, get specific. Let's hear it. Hey, y'all ever been in Tucson Airport? Y'all ever fly to Tucson Airport? You guys just go to Phoenix. I'm like, if I can fly out of Tucson Airport, I'm doing it. Okay? I'll pay $50 more. Okay? Call me bougie. I'll do it. Okay? I'll do it. But hey, I'm the type of guy when I travel, when I fly, man, I'm trying to show up as late as possible. Like, I'm trying to walk up to the gate right as they're starting to board. Is anybody else like this? That's what I'm talking about. Hey, that's what I'm talking about. You guys are living life the right way. No, where would you rather chill? At your house or in the gate on some uncomfortable chairs? You know what I'm saying? And it does help, okay? I don't mean to brag, but I do have TSA pre-check. So, hey, look into it. $80 for 5 years. Great investment. Not as good of an investment as growing in your faith, but it's still a really good investment. Well, hey, one time I was flying from Dallas back to Phoenix, and my friend was dropping me off at the airport, and so I couldn't do my normal time, okay? He had places to be, so I said, okay, whenever you need to drop me off, you can do that. So 2 hours early, I show up to my flight. This is uncharted territory for me. I never do this. So I'm like, what do I do with all this time? I know Dane and Summer, they like getting to airports early. They'll go have a sit-down restaurant, you know, eat a nice meal. I didn't know what to do. I start going around the shops. I start looking. I'm looking at books I'll never buy, looking at shirts I'll never wear. I'm like, what do I do with this time? I think I bought my mom like a beanie that said Texas. Like, that's why they have you there early, so you can buy stuff. I found the system. Okay, I'm not falling into it again. Anyway, so finally I'm like, you know what, let me just eat a good meal. I'm in Dallas, might as well have some Whataburger. So I'm eating my Whataburger. I'm like looking at my phone. It says 12 o'clock. I'm like, okay, I'm chilling. It's 11:45. Eating my burger, taking my time, just like, man, you know, have the napkin in the collar for the Whataburger, you know, wiping off the hands, put it away, wash my hands after. I'm feeling like I got all the time in the world. I'm like, okay, 12 o'clock. I'm like B30 for Southwest, so I'm not even going to board for another 10 minutes. Let me just stroll on over to the gate. And I'm walking over the gate, and I'm like, man, it's weird. There's no line. That's so weird. What's going on? And then I show up to the gate, and I see there is no plane. So I'm like, okay, maybe it got moved. I better, you know, hustle a little bit if it got moved. So I like go to the counter, and he's like, no, the plane is left, sir. The departure time was 12 o'clock. The boarding time was 11:25. You showed up at 12:10. Like, the plane is gone. I straight up missed the plane, and I was there 2 hours early. That's why I never get to the airport that early again. I'll miss the flight, okay? I got to get there right before. Man, I had all the details for this flight. I ended up having to fly to San Diego, wait like 4 hours, fly from San Diego to Phoenix, get home at like 10 p.m. instead of 12 at noon. It was a full day I wasted because I missed my flight, and I was there 2 hours early. Man, I had all the details figured out. I knew where to walk around. I knew what food I was going to eat, but I was missing the most important piece of information, the boarding and departure time. What if we lived our whole lives trying to figure out every little detail to what it meant to follow Christ, but we were missing the most important part. Look at this last verse. Look what it says. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. See, God's saying, hey, there's people who are foolish and there's people who are wise. And those who are wise understand what the will of the Lord is. So what is the will of the Lord? What does Jesus want for those who are following him? The good thing is Jesus makes this very simple. He's very straightforward in how he says this. He says, hey, I've got the greatest commandment, and then he has his last words that he departs to his followers. I'm just going to read both of them real quick. And it says like this in the Bible. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him, that's Jesus, a question to test him. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets. That's the first thing he says. Then before he dies, before he leaves, he says this. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. The will of the Lord is three very simple things. It's love God, love your neighbor, make disciples. Love God, love your neighbor, make disciples. What does it look like to love God? Man, Jesus says, whoever has my commandments and keeps them, he it is who loves me. It just means, hey, spending time with Jesus, reading the Bible, praying, and following his commandments to the best that we can, and asking him for his help and asking him for his forgiveness where we fall short. Man, that's going to grow your love for God. Man, loving your neighbor is basically just putting someone else in front of you. So whether that's your next door neighbor, whether that's your fraternity brother, your sorority sister, whether that's even somebody on the other side of the world, God says, hey, put someone else's interest before your own. Look to serve. And then the last one, make disciples. To simply put, make disciples is to initiate faith conversations with those who don't know Jesus, share about Jesus, and then teach them what you have been taught on how to follow Jesus. Love God, love your neighbor, and make disciples. That's all the will of the Lord is. So God says, hey, to invest your life is to live for God's will. So my question, hey, what would our lives look like if loving God, loving your neighbor, and making disciples drove all of your decisions? Like, what if, when you're thinking, okay, where am I going to spend my time? What job am I going to take? Where am I going to live? What if you were thinking about these three commands whenever you were making your decisions? I think about a guy named Jackson Dunn. Man, Jackson, he's a teak. He got involved with StuMo pretty late in the game. He was a junior when he met a StuMo staff guy named Danny. And Danny was a guy who lived to love God, love his neighbor, and make disciples. Jackson was going through a hard time in his life. Danny heard him out. He was a shoulder to lean on, and he shared with him about Christ. Jackson gave his life to Christ and started growing in his faith with Danny. Well, Jackson, he's a smart guy. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's going into his senior year. He's already got the dream internship lined up in Europe. Well, Danny tells him about an opportunity to grow in his faith at Kaleo, and Jackson invests his time in college and says no to the dream internship in Europe and goes to Kaleo instead to grow in his faith. He comes back from studying abroad. He comes back to campus, and he's fired up to live for God's will. He starts a Bible study in Teak, and he's trying to help younger guys know how to follow God in life. Jackson is a guy who understands what the will of the Lord is. Jackson is a guy who is investing his life for God. Well done, Jackson. Keep going, brother. I think about Julia, a senior Kyo here. Julia came to StuMo. She starts connecting with Heather. That's Julia on the left, Heather on the right. She starts connecting with her. They start growing their friendship. She starts growing in her faith. She starts meeting with Summer, one of the StuMo staff girls, and is just teachable and wanting to know what does it look like to follow God in college. She's an extremely smart girl. She's an electrical and computer engineering major. So like right under finance. Like she's smart. She is very smart. Very, very smart. Very smart. Man, she makes, I asked Summer, hey, what's something that stands out about Julia? And she said, hey, every time she makes a decision in her life, she weighs the pros and cons and she counts the cost. How will this affect my faith? Is this going to bring me closer to God? Is this going to help me make disciples? Or is it going to bring me further away? She's graduating. She's choosing where to live, what job to take, what to do with her life. And that is how she is viewing what she's going to do next. Julia is someone who understands what the will of the Lord is. Love God, love your neighbor, make disciples. Julia is someone who is investing her life for God. Well done, Julia. Keep going. How will you invest your time in college? How will you invest your life? I think back to when I invested in NVIDIA as a freshman. And I'm like, man, I would have invested all $2,500 I had. I would have thrown it all. And even when the times went down, the stock price went down, I would have said, hey, I'm doubling down. I'm putting more money in because I know the return on this is going to be even greater. Man, when I think about my time in college, I don't regret 1 minute I spent growing in my faith. Waking up early before workouts to read the Bible. Dude, I don't regret 1 minute doing that. Coming to late night on a Wednesday night, man, I don't regret ever showing up to late night. There's times when I didn't and I regret it, but every time I came, I always was thankful I did. I don't regret using the 1.5 hour gap between classes to meet with either a StuMo leader or a StuMo staff guy. Man, every single time I did that, I just knew it helped me grow in my faith, and I don't regret any of it now. I think about all the times I talked to my teammates about faith, even when they shot me down, even when they made fun of me, even when I thought none of them would ever be interested in following Jesus. I look back now and I see guys who I never thought would follow Christ reach out to me and talk to me about wanting to know how to follow Jesus years after graduation. I don't regret 1 minute of growing in my faith in college. It's the greatest return I've ever had on any investment I've made. There's no greater return in life than growing in your faith. There's 4 weeks left of the school year this year. 4 weeks. 4 weeks left of your freshman year. 4 weeks left of your sophomore year, your junior year. 4 weeks left of your time in college. I know it's sad. Remember, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise, making the best use of time, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the will of the Lord is. There's no greater investment than growing in your faith, and there's no better time to start than now in college. How will you invest your time in college? How will you invest your life? Thank you, guys.